Oh, it's my turn, right? Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to Cerberus At The Gate. Peyman is embedded somewhere in the United States, somewhere on the southeast coast, enjoying stuff that you do in America. Andre and I are here this afternoon, and we're going to hold down the fort while Peyman is off doing his embedded thing. Be sure to check out Inlay Terms. He's been astonishingly active and bringing some very, very interesting and capable people to his show the last few weeks for sure. He's close to 260 episodes now. Andre and myself today are going to talk about separation, but we want to talk about separation from a more historical perspective to begin with, and then we'll bring it up to recent events such as the new Facebook group page BC Prosperity Project, which is like a sister page to the Alberta Prosperity Project and the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project. I see pattern recognition taking place here. The BC Prosperity Project started not quite 3 weeks ago, and it's already at 14,000 members. So while I am not necessarily a separatist at heart, I think this conversation absolutely must take place. You have 14,000 people within 3 weeks saying, I've had enough. That's a voice that needs to be heard. So today we're going to look at the history of it. Andre and I will wander through. Andre will start. It's pretty much going to be his show this afternoon, and I'm just going to make smart-ass remarks in between. We will start with General Charles de Gaulle in Quebec, going all the way back to 1967, the Parti Québécois, the Quebec referendum, comparisons with Alberta, and then we will move forward into where we are today. And that's our general path. Around the 20 or 30-minute mark, we'll pause for questions. So if you do have questions, ask them now, and we'll flag them along as we go. And that's the agenda. The floor is yours, Andre.
Well, okay. First of all, thank you, Tim, for this intro. Sylvie, Jazzy, repost to the stream. Thank you, Sylvie. Don't forget to repost, share, like, and subscribe so we can increase our audience because we are most probably shadow banned. We're starting to challenge, and we're hitting very hard on Tucker Carlson. So I think now we are we are a threat to the establishment.
Mhm.
Tim was mentioning the historic part of what we call the separation movement or the sovereignist movement. And he referred to Charles de Gaulle, 1967. Charles de Gaulle came in Quebec, the president of France. And to the, I would say, the surprise of everybody when he was in Montreal in front of the mayor of the city of Montreal, he after his speech or during his speech, at the end of his speech, he was with Daniel Johnson, the late prime minister, and he declared, "Vive le Québec libre." Let's the let's make Quebec a sovereign, a free country in a sense. It's about translation. I'm sorry, but the goal took everybody by surprise. Nobody were expecting this type of declaration, especially because the government at the time was the Union Nationale of Daniel Johnson, National Union, and this party was not pro-separatist. This party was wanted to renew the confederation, renew the contract. That's based on this text that is égalité or independence. We are equal, or we will promote independence. The first word is equal. So the goal was there to support Daniel Johnson, the father. Unfortunately, Daniel Johnson died a couple of months after that. He was replaced by another member of parliament who became prime minister of Quebec, an MLA, sorry. And after that arrived the 1970 October crisis. And the crisis was a political crisis because the actual federal government with Pierre Trudeau was starting to push multiculturalism and was starting to jeopardize the sovereignist movement in Quebec. You had the Rassemblement de l'Indépendance Nationale with Pierre Bourgault, and they allied with René Lévesque at the time. René Lévesque left the Liberal Party of Quebec, and he created the Parti Québécois in 1968, I think. So when the crisis arrived in 1970 with the October crisis, the Quebec society was already polarized. You had on one side, the hard separatists. I use the word separatist, not the word sovereignist, because at the time, many federalist people, they were accusing the people, they want to destroy the country. That was the main strategy. Then you arrive in 1976 with the first election of the government of the Parti Québécois with René Lévesque, and Lévesque at the time promised. He won with, I think, 67 MLA over 100, something like that. He had a very comfortable majority, and he said, and I quote, he said, "We will do a first referendum. We will do a referendum in our first term," which means, technically 4 years, within 4 years. And this is exactly what he did, because he knew that the term, usually the term of a government is 4 years, 4 years and a half. So he arrived in 1980, May 1980, and they had the first referendum that was lost. 60% for the no and 40% for the yes. And there was a campaign of fear. They were afraid. They were pushing Quebecers. You can call them French Canadian or Canadian in Quebec, because you had English community. You had many people from immigration. People, they were scared of losing all the financial aspect. Let's not forget 1963. All the national electric company were nationalized, and Quebec went to Wall Street to borrow $650 million. So the fear was there, and I think many people fell from it. I was 20 years old. Of course, I voted yes. Like I say all the time, I voted yes in the first referendum because I was naive, and I voted yes in the second referendum because I was an ignorant. So we can talk about later about the future of other referendum. But
what's that line? When I was 20, I was a liberal. When I was 40, I was a conservative.
Something like that. So 1980, the first referendum. Then the Parti Québécois was surfing on a wave of good ideas. Okay, we will form a good government. We will forget about sovereignty, and you had, between 1980 and 1985, you had constitutional reform or constitutional negotiation. And 1982, when Pierre Trudeau brought back the Constitution that was not signed by Quebec, I think the gap started to increase. And then you had Meech Lake. And Meech Lake was supposed to be an agreement that would satisfy both parties. And Meech Lake did not work. And up to a certain point, many people were asking, well, does the federal government wants to have a renewal of the Confederation? So you had Meech Lake that did not work. And then you had Charlottetown. And Charlottetown brought the idea that in the sovereignist mind in Quebec, we have to get out of the Confederation. Not necessarily to destroy Canada, because the idea was to be able to build the concept that I don't like, sovereignty association, that was created by René Lévesque. The Sovereignty Association, which is, in my opinion, it's an oxymoron. You're sovereign or you're an associate. You cannot have both. But that was the idea, to appease, the more radical element of the Parti Québécois at the time. That led to the second referendum in 1995. I will end on one thing. In 1994, the Bloc was created. When Lucien Bouchard left with Gilles Duceppe, they left the the Conservative Party, and they created the Bloc. And the Bloc was the I would say the wild card, federally speaking. When you think about 1995, the government of Quebec was the government of the Parti Québécois, and they were promoting the referendum, the separation or the sovereignty of Quebec, with the help of the Bloc, with the help of a federal party.
Mhm.
And at the end, we know the result. The no won, but with 50.5%, and 49.5% for the yes. But let's not forget the scandal of the sponsorship commandite after that affected the Liberal Party. So that's the historical part. The idea that France was coming here to help Quebec assume its position like the only French community in America. That's I think it's an important
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah.
I think Quebecers wanted to preserve their culture. They were not necessarily aware of the economic aspect, because I remember the time when during the second referendum, Jacques Parizeau was saying, "Okay, we will keep the Canadian dollar, and we will negotiate with Canada." But it's like you say, if you're separate and you're recognized by the United Nations and you use a foreign currency, it's quite awkward. And I think
That's
many people did not pay attention to the economic aspect of the second referendum.
that's
And
Puerto Rico. That's Puerto
yeah,
Rico,
well, yes, and you
right?
have some precedent, but
Yeah.
I think uh, we can compare, and I have a small chart that I can bring if you permit
Mhm.
me,
Yep.
Tim. It's a small comparison between Quebec and Alberta. In 1980, the debt of Quebec was $11.6 billion for a population of 6.5 million people. So the debt per capita was $1,780. You go on the Alberta side, and I said, okay, I will just compare. Shit, it doesn't work. Alberta did not have any debt. There was a federal debt, but provincially there was no debt for a
Yeah.
population of 2.2 million. So you say, okay, this is a good start. Their economy is good. You go in 1995, the second referendum, the debt has increased to $74.5 billion. And look at the population. The population is not growing very fast. If you compare to with Alberta, the debt of Alberta, I think I made a mistake. It's not 74. It is less than that. Alberta debt was quite lower than that, but the debt per capita was $3,000. And you compare this with the debt per capita in Quebec, which is practically 3 times more. You go in 2026, and you have a debt of $255 billion for 9 million of population, $28,000 per citizen. And you go on the side of Alberta, and you say, okay, it's at $82 billion debt for a population of 5 million. So $16,000. But what I want to put the emphasis on is the population. Between 1990 and 2026, the population of Alberta doubled, more than doubled, while the population of Quebec did not rise as fast. Now the birth rate in Quebec is 1.33, so it's very low. If you keep the space in Alberta, you say, okay, even if you have a debt, you can sustain it because you have a
Mm.
replacement. The population is replaced, and you can assume the burn
Yeah.
of a debt. But it's not the same thing in Quebec. That's the only thing I wanted to show, because I think economically speaking, we do not make a lot of comparison between provinces. And unfortunately, because we should do this, we could maybe understand why, for example, Quebec is not developing its natural resources. It maybe we would not have this level of debt if we would be proactive in Quebec like they are in Alberta. So Tim, what's your
Uh,
what's
the
your opinion? What's your
the
opinion about
you
this?
you 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 mentioned were Quebec to develop their natural resources, so that would be their lumber, ore, right, coal, it's the water, right, like water, not just for hydroelectric, but also water, potable water. If they were to develop these, then how much would this debt per capita be offset, right? By new development, by new refineries, by new storage, by new internal market, internal internal merchandising, selling it into the market, etc. And then swing over to Alberta and say, how much would their debt be reduced if they were not paying transfer payments? Because that's part of their debt,
Yes.
right? So so you have a Quebec population that is intentionally not told. You could experience a degree of sovereignty. You could experience by
Yeah.
developing, right? Go your own way, like carve your own province the way you see fit with the resources that you have. But the provincial government and the federal government regarding Quebec are satisfied with status quo because it gives them both individual control points, right, provincially and federally. So when the people in Quebec make noise about a referendum for separation, the federal government allows them to squirrel on that, and so does the provincial government. As long as they don't look at the fact that they are this massive resource that's on the eastern side of the Canadian Shield with all of this wealth that's just waiting to be, responsibly, but waiting to be harvested and used for Canadian benefit. However, when Alberta makes noise about a referendum or about separation, suddenly Alberta is complaining, and Alberta should be satisfied with the way things are, and you should be and so the it's like saying you can have this flag, but you can't have this flag. And when we move in toward what we've been watching with Alberta, particularly since COVID, and when as the population becomes more aware of government's provincial and federal, becomes more aware of their skullduggery and the way they actually do hold hands on a wide range of policies and projects, then the people go, they wake up. I don't mean to use that phrase quite that way. And then they begin to see the different ways in which they've been taken advantage of. So now that there's this active, progressive, and I mean that in a conservative manner, not a liberal progress manner, people lining up to sign petitions and in the snow, etc. So the people are, when you are physically volunteering, when you are physically marking your calendar to go and do something that is very activist in physical nature, then the government begins to pay attention. And the government pays attention by telling Premier Danielle Steele, the cowboy romance novelist, to begin to make concessions and to give the people the words that the federal government wants them to hear, because I don't believe for a second that she wants to separate from Canada. So you have a population in Alberta that, for all intents and purposes, has been led down the same garden path as the population over in Quebec, because valuable information has been withheld from them. And when they learn about the way they're actually being treated, they're being redirected and misdirected.
What you're mentioning, when I go back to the amount of the debt, or the equalization of the transfer payment, my personal experience when I was 35, 1995, I voted yes. But after that, when the referendum was lost, I completely forgot about it. And many Quebecers, they were like, sleeping through a certain period of time until 2008, with the first financial crisis in 2008. People started to wake up, and I will say, the dissatisfaction of Albertan, it is not new. It's an old problem. Nobody in Canada ever tackled the problem of equalization. And the anger of Albertans kept rising and rising slowly, up to a point where you say, okay, that's enough. I divorce. That's it. That's it. No matter what the cost will be, I divorce. And I think this is where I think there's a momentum for Alberta, not to break the country, but to reshuffle the card and to say, okay, we will lead the march toward Ottawa.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the Freedom Convoy started there. It started in the West.
Mhm.
So the idea after that, the eastern part followed the movement.
Mhm.
But in my opinion, it's an historic moment, and my concern is I would not want to see Albertan be accused of being traitors or separatists or breaking the country, which the country is already in very bad in bad bad shape. So, what do you think that can happen
Well,
eventually?
who in the media called any single Quebecer through the entire process of two referendums a traitor? Who in the media called any Quebecer a traitor? None of them.
Actually, no, because it's the Albertan who are taking the shot
Right,
now.
but I'm referring now. But I'm looking back to the comparisons. You've got people like Ebby calling Albertans who are speaking out in favor of separation, and what they're really doing is saying government's broken. It must be fixed by extreme measures such as separation, if need be. That's what they're really saying, and which is perfectly fine. And we've got other government leaders, and it's British Columbia, it's Ebby, who shouldn't be sticking his nose into another province's issues anyway, because he's got enough of his own trouble, calling these people citizens traitors. It's ad hominem, and it's what it's straw manning and steel manning and all the good stuff. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, during two referendums, there wasn't one single premier who called Quebecers traitors,
They were
right?
not
So
calling them traitors, but I remember Jean Chrétien. Like I said, they use the word that suits their agenda. When they wanted to attack somebody, they were calling them separatists. When they wanted to negotiate, they were calling them nationalists, or the idea that nationalists were
yeah,
referring to practically the Nazi
yeah,
or sovereignist. So they were using those three
yeah.
words. And what you're mentioning with David Avey, it doesn't surprise me.
No,
It suits their interests.
it's interesting, right? It's like they have a playbook. If A, then right. If people do
Yes,
this, then use this language. If they do this, then use this language. If you do this, then they use language. If they don't do any of this, then just business as normal. And they
yes.
have this playbook, and they all share it back and forth. Meanwhile, when the sovereigntists or the separatists or the nationalists, they may say, well, if the government does this, then we say this, and if the businesses say this, then we say this. The Which is right, but the problem is the citizen and even small citizen coalitions are never going to have the reach and the capacity that a government has or a corporation has. So when you see the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is a Facebook social media group, when you see them make the inroads that they have been making into those communities, and the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project, which is like a sister or next door neighbor type of also in the same vein, and now within the last 2 or 3 weeks, a British Columbia Prosperity Project Facebook social media group page has come up. And in that last 2.5 weeks or so, that page has 14,000 members. And I don't care if you're pro separation or you want to keep Canada together or you're satisfied to see it break up into a coalition of independent states or whatnot. The fact that these tens of thousands of people are saying this conversation must be had demands that this conversation be had. And it would do well to Ebby in BC and Smith in Alberta and Mo, right? Saskatchewan. Say, we hear you. Let's have a conversation. Because you permit them to burn off a little bit of steam, and then you can go back to what you're doing. And they're not doing that. So it's very poorly managed by the political agents that are involved. And these groups are going to continue to grow. If I understand correctly, these groups are actually organizing, professionally organizing. So this is serious, and these are qualified, capable people who are the cream, are coming up to the top and saying, "We're going to get that. We're going to make this happen." And I think this is going to be the bulk of the conversation in 2026, aside from the CPC clearly showing that they are the right hand, right? That they are the right hand of a government that's walking in unison. So aside from that,
Keep the CPC for the dessert.
mhm.
Because I have two questions for you. First of all, Johnny GT, thank you. He's here. He's on YouTube, but he's in jail for telling the NFL to die over the selection of a deviant Super Bowl performer. So, GT, we can bring you coffee and croissant in jail, no problem. Thank you for being here. Also, Dan, thank you for reposting the stream. Squirrel Nut, thank you for reposting the stream. And I think we have one comment here. Great point. It will be the same song and dance with Alberta around verbiage. I like the word.
Yeah,
In terms of calling Albertans separatist
yeah,
versus independent. I
yeah.
have one question for you, Tim. You mentioned the group on Facebook for BC. 1990, there was no social media. You had, the mainstream media was, TV, radio, newspaper.
Bulletin board
1995,
systems.
yes, you did not have this type of alternative media or social media that can rise from practically nothing in thousands of subscriber or follower. We did not even understand was the concept of follower. 1990, 1980, 1995, 2026. When we see the tendency now, and I refer to this Facebook group, do you think that those groups can influence enough the political sphere actually to make them understand or be aware that if you don't release the pressure valve, the
Hmm.
relief valve, if you don't do this, if you don't
Yeah.
pay attention, they will become more and more loud. What, how they will, how they will evolve in the next, let's say, 3 months. 3 months is a long time.
Intelligence analysts will watch these types of events, and they already do, where they see spikes in groups of like-mindedness show up in different platforms and different social media. So they pay attention because they're flagged and they know what to look for. What really matters, as long as you're contained in your silo and you're all just bitching and complaining and blowing off steam, because there's a psychological dopamine release, right? When that happens, you just gotta, oh, I just have to get it off my chest, right? And so there's relief in that, and you don't actually have to go and do something to change the situation. And most people live like this. But when they become active, when the organizers and active people are volunteering and saying, we're going to hold an event at the local Tim Hortons in our town, or we're gonna have a conference, 6 of us are going to show up. So when they physically take it out of the interwebs and put it into the real world, then intelligence agencies will start really paying attention. Then people will be flagged, then people will be put on lists, and then they will watch what happens. At that time is when the governments should really begin to pay attention. And the truth is, the response to that, now let's pretend I'm the government. My best response is to say, I'm going to send our local MLA out, and we're going to do a town hall, and we're specifically, so you reframe it, right? So you send all your MLAs back to their town where the angry Albertans are holding their events. You send your MLA out and you tell the MLA, you will have this conversation, but you will reframe it. You will say, we hear it's a feel, felt, found. It's all sales, right? So we'll switch it, and you'll go, and this will be your town hall. And then the majority of the people will feel heard. So they'll go to this. So the prosperity, not necessarily these specific groups, but the people will go, and they will to these MLA town halls, and they'll all across the province. So you counter with, you reframe the story, you reframe the language, because then the never wasers, right, the hangers on come in, the ones who are curious, they come in not being familiar with the language of the particular movement, will hear the language for the first time framed to them by an MLA who they already trust. intrinsically because lab coat syndrome is a thing. That's how you manage that. So if these groups, the BC Prosperity, Alberta Prosperity Discussion, etc., Quebec even, right? Because they're still separatists. They still want to get this sorted out. The way to counter that ahead of time, cut them off at the pass, is knowing that's happened, you maintain your momentum. National website, perhaps, or something that gives everybody opportunity to speak, right, away from social media platforms, et cetera, et cetera. And the knowing that the government will eventually try to reframe it and say, we hear you, and give you the, oh, I feel so good. I talked to my MLA and he totally understands. I feel so represented right now, right? Somebody give me a Timmy's and a donut. I feel so Canadian right now. And bring you all back into we understand, big hugs, right? One of the big new Olympic cozy jackets, and here you go, feel Canadian, and then
This
right?
is
Yes, and pat you on the head. You're very good. I'm such a good Canadian. You're bringing your voice to the government. Completely diffuse it, and that gives you another 6 months.
okay.
That's
Okay.
all that matters.
Now, well, okay. You're talking about six. You go really fast. I was just expecting 3 months, but you mentioned something important. They will have to do damage control, and usually either the liberal or the conservative because we can talk about the Uni Party, but they're not very good at damage control. Usually, they don't even care the damage that they're doing. Uh, it surprised me. Do you really think that Canadian will fall for this? Because if they see that the movement gains momentum and they are starting to lose the narrative, how they will react?
Will Canadians fall for it? You go talk to 10 random Canadians and ask how many to their face, because you need the reaction. Did you take the COVID vaccine? 10 random Canadians.
Oh, my
Eight
God.
of them will say yes, they did. And
Well,
of
I
that
would say,
eight, of that eight,
I would say six of them would say that they took it. Two will not want to say it because they were ashamed that they took
two
it.
will lie.
Two will
Yeah,
lie.
and they'll be the ones who are most angry, right? This self-righteous, indignant. How dare you ask me such a question? It's not like you suddenly died and I was asking about your heart attack or anything, but yeah. So, will Canadians do this? Yes. Why? Because Canadian, right? I joke because I'm like born in '68, and my generation, Gen X, started in '65, so to speak. And we brag about how we singing our songs in the '80s, with all the big hair bands and everything, that we're not going to take it. Right? We are
Yes,
indeed taking it.
you're still taking it. You're still
We're
taking it.
absolutely taking it.
Come
Right? Our
on.
whole culture has become so incredibly bourgeois. and
Well,
and 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 we
that's
want
what
we
that's
we
that's
want we demand that comfort, and you can't take that comfort to me, and I will sell my children into slavery if you take away my Timmies.
okay. That you're making a difference between people who live in cities and people who live in the
Mm-hmm.
country. Some repost. Dan G, thank you for reposting. Sundown 95, thank you for reposting the stream. Wait, I do have another one. There's a lot of comment in a sense that you refer to Gen X.
Yeah.
Gen Xers learned this would come. You knew
Yep.
that, and you didn't do nothing, Tim Knight.
Welcome to the '80s.
Because you were mentioning the sovereignness in Quebec. Actually, the last poll, even if we can take some and leave some, based on polls, the last provincial poll in Quebec shows that 60% of the population will vote against a potential referendum in Quebec. 60-40, 65-35. And those are numbers that are constant. They do not vary a lot. One thing that I want to ask you about Alberta. In 1995, The government of Quebec, which was the government of the Parti Québécois under the government of Jacques Parizeau, was promoting the independence and was the leader with the group, the association, and all those groups that were, it was like a project manager with his team. They were promoting the sovereignty of Quebec. They were in it. What is happening with Danielle Smith in Alberta? She's where in the
I call her Danielle Steele, the cowboy romance novelist, for a reason, right? So you have, I mean, clearly she's capable. She's a capable politician, right? And you know, you look at the news that comes out about hospital closures and emergency closures and failure to deliver care and school issues, and it's the ongoing nonsense with Soji. With it's there's no real quote unquote progress. There's no real measurable return to what I call, it's so bad I forgot what I call it, integrity and justice, the two different things, but I think those are fundamental. There's no real return to that. Danielle Steele, I cannot get away from this. When she ran to lead, right? Like, and now I can't. Now I say it all the time. When she ran for leadership at the UCP, she said, "The boys in the Coots Four, I will see them released." And after she won leadership at the UCP, she stopped talking about it. 4 years later, the last of the Coots Four is released. However, he was released on bail.
On bail, yes, that's
Nobody
very
mentions
important.
this. Nobody mentions it. This is the same thing as saying, "Oh, the COVID mandates are over." No, they are not over. Trudeau said they are suspended. Right. So we need to pay attention, and this goes back again to the stress, the relief valve, right? The able to complain. So you package the bomb, the salve, right, by giving the people their release, but on the end of it is more rope, right? On the end of it is the rest of the chain. It's just barely there out of sight. Danielle Steele is a career politician, and she's making ready to move to the national stage, right? Or the international stage.
Which one international stage? The United Nations that is now defunded by Donald Trump.
I don't think she'll end up in the United Nations. I think she'll end up in some WEF adjacent organization, right? And probably something related to oil. Because
so it would mean that she's not working for Alberta. Which politician?
I said politician, not statesman.
Okay, I understood. I understood the nuance. Yeah. Which politicians in Canada can speak now about the Alberta sovereignist? I will use the word sovereignist or independentist movement. Which one is mature enough to understand the situation we are in now?
There is currently no provincial or federal political party leader who can speak with integrity toward justice, because none of their parties are managed with integrity or justice. None of them.
So, do you think that the Alberta movement has to distance himself from those political party? Even the Conservative Party of Canada, with their convention and what happened in the last week, it seems that they want to distance themselves from the movement because they don't want to be accused of being traitors, or
See, if
what would be the good advice for them?
If Danielle Smith continues to make, I have to use her right name now. If Danielle Smith steps back into supporting or standing beside or recognition, right? Recognizes this movement in Alberta, recognize it as an actual entity, not merely a sentiment, but as an actual political entity, then she risks Ottawa's anger. And even though in publicly, she rails against, she puts Carney in his place type of thing, and strong independent woman, right? And she does that bit, and she does it pretty good. But Carney is on the backside saying, "Listen, lady, this is the way it's going to go down. If you want any political future at all, you will play this by my rules, right?" Because look at Mo, right? Was it last week or so, right? When the poor Saskatchewan premier, and Carney opens his mouth about the New World Order statement. Look at Mo's face.
Yeah, he was like,
Look at Mo's
this
face.
is funny, body language.
Yeah, it's all body language. So it's, and it sounds like pop psychology when you do it, or like marketing or whatever. But watch their body language. Do they open when they make promises, or they make when they endear themselves to the people with language? Does their body open up, right? Do they open? Do their hands extend? Are their fingers pointed away? Do they lean in are they creating intimacy when they communicate in public? And if they're not, right? If they're making this is how you make a promise. I'm absolutely going to give you everything you ever wanted.
I will bring one comment because it is in line with what you just said. All those upper leaders are at the bottom of a different totem pole.
What's that line we keep hearing? It's a big club and you ain't in it.
And you ain't in it.
Is it George Carlin, right?
Carlin. And I think they are not listening at all.
They don't have to. They pay people to listen for them.
Well, there was a small scandal this week between the Conservative Party of Canada and those influencers that were that they took a picture.
Yes.
For me, it's it's not necessarily interesting. I would go more. I would like to go back to Quebec and are there any negotiation or discussion, for example, between Danielle Smith or the movement, the Alberta movement, and the nationalists in Quebec? It seems to me that I see no collaboration. They don't talk to each other. I think they don't even. I think Alberta, they don't speak French, and French in Quebec, they don't speak English. They would need a translator. My fees are quite expensive. Are there any collaboration and discussion? I don't see nothing in the news.
Quebecers don't speak Western, and Westerners don't speak Quebec. They just don't. And that's by design, specifically since Pierre Trudeau Sr., right? And then reinforced even by Harper, who said, I'm going to adjust the equalization formula, and then pushes it more in favor of Quebec. Right? I'm absolutely going to do what you need me to do. I'm absolutely going to do it. Yes, I mark my words. No new taxes. Whoops, right? And so an interesting thing you mentioned is there any collaboration at the provincial level? Because we always have the First Ministers Conference, right? So what happens lately since Trudeau, for sure? Actually Harper's guilty of it too. Bring the First Ministers together and say, now here's how it's going to be, you sons of bitches. Right? You're gonna because the federal government uses its spending power like a whip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because they absolutely refuse to permit the provinces to operate, to use the actual jurisdiction that they have according to the Constitution. Like or lump the Constitution, when it's executed properly, it's a lot more stable than what we have today. And on that note, I don't have any details yet, but apparently the 4 Western provinces have come to some type of sidereal alignment where they're going to help each other develop natural resources, in particular minerals.
Which province? You mean BC, Alberta?
Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia have come to some early a memorandum of opera.
Well, do you think, or whatever? Okay, Manitoba, the Prime Minister, the First Minister of Manitoba, or Scott Moe, I forgot his name.
No, Manitoba is Wabu.
I forgot his name. Do you think that they're starting to smell fire? They say, shit, if Alberta leaves, we will be stuck facing the federal government, and we don't have the ammunition to counterattack. And when I had a podcast with Michael Jones, he was referring to Saskatchewan and Alberta, who have a very natural bond with I forgot the state in United States that are south of the border. I forgot it.
Montana, is it?
Montana. Yes, I'm sorry, Montana.
Yeah.
And they have a natural alliance because they are rural, they are oil and gas, they are independent people. So they would be able, Alberta, Saskatchewan. Maybe I still don't understand why it would not be Alberta, Saskatchewan who would proclaim their sovereignty and not separate.
So,
that's two different language.
So what I think happened is, and you wander back to watching King Charles when he came in, he said, we are going to make independent relationships. We're going to talk to each province to speed run their natural resources to development. And this is investment language, which is actually debt spending, because they're turning everything out. They're lying, right? They're lying. And so you have Carney, who has been in talks with all of the provinces separately in order to bring them into line with the King's Declaration, which is an actual proclamation. King stood here on Canadian soil in a room that is this facsimile of his throne and delivered a speech and said, we are going to do this. You are going to do this. This will be done. That's proclamation. So now here is, Governor Carney, right, who has to deliver it. And the timing is useful because you have this anti-government sentiment in the West, particularly Alberta, and a little bit more now in Saskatchewan. So you take the 4 Western provinces and you go to them and say, I've already had conversations with each of you individually, and now you're going to work together. And then say, when you tell the public this, when you announce this memorandum, you will announce it as if it is your own idea. And then so those angry citizens go, oh, finally the West is doing something together. Meanwhile, Carney's like, suckers.
Yes, but let's give a little bit more credit to conservative people. And when I think about Albertans, no. Let me finish. Let me finish my thought. When I think about, I'm not talking about the party. I'm talking about conservative people, conservative mind.
Me too.
Yes, I know. That's why you laugh. No, I think it's over. No matter what will happen, it's over. Canada will never be the same anymore. It is not already. And people are just starting to pay attention to what is happening in Alberta. In Quebec, it's business as usual, actually, because the government, we had a show a couple of weeks ago about the Quebec pseudo-constitution with the embedded abortion in the constitution and MAID. And people here, even in Quebec, even left-wing and feminists, they were worried about this project of constitution. So the Parti Québécois will not use the same strategy if they win the provincial election, and if they propose a referendum. First of all, it takes months to organize a referendum like this, and if they are at 60-40, I'm sorry, but you start with 2 strikes against you. So the Alberta movement is much more close to something that would concern or worry the actual federal government. You say Carney says, oh, this sucker, I control everything. I'm not sure he's controlling anything.
That man is much more dangerous than Trudeau before him. Now, whether or not this is all his plan, or he's, quasi meticulously executing something that was given to him by the king or by other, what I call unelected external agents and agencies, very likely to be part of the case. I mean, we've talked about how, as far as we're concerned, he is an emissary of the City of London and the Bank of London, sent back to Canada to drag us kicking and screaming back to the crown as a colony, and to turn us back into drawers of water and hewers of wood. and to do that in a fashion where we choose it because the alternative is unacceptable. And right now, the alternative that they're painting to us is a a firm trade and security relationship with the United States. And at the same time, this mind blowing relationship being formed with China, that is not because China is good for Canada. It's because China is a way to thumb their nose at America. That's it. That's it. So the Parliament, or at least the executive branch of Parliament, which is not really a thing. That's an Americanism, but the Liberal government in Parliament Hill is dragging us back to an a British centric and therefore Eurocentric. Now I'm predicting because Britain wants back into the EU badly. The EU wants Britain back into the EU badly, but they both want Britain. Sorry, but Britain wants back in as this is my party, this is my house. I rule. EU wants Britain back in a subservient position. And so that's the internal fight that's happening over
Well,
there.
I would say let them have their party of losers, because EU will be most probably dissolve when you
Yep.
think about what is happening with Slovakia, Slovenia, and Hungary, who are opposing the budget for reconstruction of Ukraine, and it the confrontation is rising in Europe. So I don't understand Carney's strategy. He will just, act as a liquidator.
Yes.
The new law releases says Charles also declared power over people, medical authority.
Yes.
Uh, Even if they have power, do
It's
they have do they have the military power or the police power to enforce this type of uh,
the
uh,
RCMP as a
power
national
grab?
police force. The RCMP as a national police force is a paramilitary force. It can be militarized, called up to active duty. It can, right? So yes, the federal government does have a boots on the ground already and does not immediately require, right, a military intervention on Canadian soil. And as we noted, as we saw when the War Measures Act was called back in 2022, they went to the military and said, "Look, if we declare um, the War Measures Act, and Emergency Act, will you participate?" And the military said, "On Canadian soil, no." So
Well,
they did two things, right? They activated, so you give special powers to the police because that's what the War Measures Act does. You give them temporary special powers, and for those police who are like, oh, I'm not really inclined to do this sort of thing, then you hire in mercenaries from Mogadishu or wherever you bring them in. Right? You just bring them in from you hire mercenaries, and you put them in black uniforms with no markings on them, and you say, here, go do this thing. They don't care because they're getting paid, and that's what happens.
yes, yes,
The
but I will make
Go ahead.
a small difference. First of all, you mentioned the War Measure Act. They renamed it the Emergency Act, and the War Measure Act that was evoked by Pierre Trudeau in
Mm-hmm.
1970
Yeah.
was for terrorism measure. The army in the street of Montreal,
Which
and
was an effect of a separatist movement.
yes, and you had, I forgot to mention, the FLQ, the Front de Libération du Québec,
Mm-hmm.
was copied on many left wing party, in Cuba and in
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela, and it's quite different today, 2022, with the Emergency Act. Yes, you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Okay, we will put boots on the ground
Okay.
against Canadian population. We saw
Yeah.
what happened in Ottawa. We saw what happened, how they were repressive with a protest that was extraordinarily peaceful. It was a really historic moment, especially when we compare what is happening now south of the border with ICE and how they are acting so violently. Do you think that the RCMP or the army would uh, send the boots on the ground in Alberta after a winning referendum?
No, this was because Ottawa is the capital of Canada, and so they treat this like a invasion Moscow or invasion London or invasion Washington event. So this was a line in
So
the
Calgary,
sand.
you will not see the police. You will not see the army in
Oh,
Calgary or in Edmonton.
it's funny because Danielle Steele has a very unhappy agitating relationship with the RCMP
Yes, you're
in
right.
Alberta, right?
Yes.
She's actively wanting to hire police force that are not the RCMP. It's the conversations about another referendum showing up in Quebec can indeed simply repeat the patterns of history because those people are no longer there. The new generation has no memory. There's no memory of the previous two referendums. So a government,
hard disk
right?
was formatted.
Right? It's because the people of your generation, and you were young, right?
Of course,
You
I
yourself
was.
were young. You yourself were young, and I was quite young. I was quite young when these things went on. So growing up in Newfoundland, I only heard about them like 6 months after because it takes that long to get the mail over to Newfoundland. Right?
Come on,
It's
1980.
1980.
1980, I was
It was
20. It was what 8 years after Woodstock and Peace and Love, and we were in
right.
this momentum of
Mhm.
somebody talks about peace and about love. You say, "Well, I will vote anything."
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
Clownword is mentioning yes, the War Measure Act versus the Emergency Act. Context has
Uh,
changed, Tim.
I can speak to that from personal experience, sort of, kind of. My father was a Canadian Guard. That's his duffel bag hanging on my wall. And as a Canadian Guard, they were stationed in Petawawa, which is just northwest of Ottawa. And when the War Measures Act was declared, my father was among the guards who patrolled Parliament Hill, so Wellington Street
In Ottawa.
in Ottawa. So he was on patrol. So at times he was a personal detail at Diefenbaker's home, but other times he was patrolling Parliament Hill. And so that was 70. I was
19th October
71 or something like that. Yeah. So I was two-ish, and my little baby sister was not even a year old. And Dad would come home, and I think Dad is like 26 years old. He's already been over the Cyprus. He's already delivered the new national flag to every legislature in Canada, like already done these really exceptional things. And now he's boots on the ground, full fatigue uniform, full combat fatigues, patrolling Wellington Street, and then stopping ladies and men with their prams, taking their babies out of the carriages and putting them his flak jacket on the ground in the rain and putting the baby on the flak jacket on the ground to inspect the carriage for armaments. And he would come home wrecked. Right? He's like, why am I doing? He's in Cyprus. I get it. Why am I doing this in my own country? It's not so much my problem with the War Measures Act is not so much that it's a War Measures Act, but that it gave carte blanche authority to men who did not care to have enough information. More than 3,000 Ontarians and Quebecers were arrested without detainment procedure.
Without warrant, without nothing. Yes, exactly.
Right? And I'm sorry, but 3,000 is a lot. I can see maybe a couple of dozen in scattered places by a few very energetic agents or police officers, whatnot. But rounding them up by the tens and doing that's wrong. The abuse is so that there might need to be act that permits that type of thing in a crisis, and the FLQ
Well,
was indeed a crisis because the murder and the kidnapping, that you have to step on that fast, and I get that. But when I see the other things that come out from it, like hiring mercenaries that are in black, I'm like, no. If you're bringing in a police force with the new Emergencies Act on a Parliament Hill to push people back, then they had better be in full red surge. Show your freaking face. If you're behind a badge, you should have enough guts to show your face and not hide behind black uniforms like some freaking coward. Right. So if you're going to wield the authority, you must be visible and you must be accountable. And they hid behind it. And that's what makes the War Measures Act wrong, is the degree of authority, unmitigated, unchallengeable authority. And that's the problem.
well, in 1970, with the War Measure Act, you had military in the street in Montreal, in Ottawa, and most probably in Toronto, and the military was that we're not in the same context anymore. 2022 with the Emergency Act, we have social media, we have live camera, live coverage. I don't want to defend the government, but when I look at what happened in 1970 with the two kidnapping of the diplomat James Cross and the Ministry of Justice Pierre Laporte, who died, I think the opportunity to for a power grab was there, even if maybe the threat was not national. I don't think that the movement in Quebec had any idea of overthrowing the government. It was not the purpose. In 2022, they never had the intention of overthrowing the government. They wanted to protest against the mandate, and even the trucker who were supposed to be the savior at the beginning of the pseudo
Yeah.
pandemic. After that, they had the plague, and it's like, wait a second, the nurse, they had the same treatment. At first, they were, the savior of people, and then after that, when they refused to have the shot, they were ostracized, they were marginalized and fired. So
So,
I think that the slow decay of authority in Canada is not a new phenomenon. There's a comment from GT. He says Canada is such a young country. To think it would not evolve into something better is to be naive. The United Province and Territories of Canada has a nice ring to it. You remember, Tim, you were mentioning many times in podcasts we had the sovereignty of province,
yeah.
the federation. Maybe you talk about this. How could we
Well,
reinstore this sovereignty of provinces?
so let's pretend I'm king of Canada, which is on my list, just so you all know. And I'm looking at this second largest country on the planet that literally spans an entire continent east to west, right? And how do you manage that? Well, we've already proven that we can't, because what did we do? We just grew houses along the railroad, right? That's it. That's all we really did. Like, you look at Canada, you have four major population centers that have developed over the course of, you know, 350 years or so. So you have, Upper Canada, Lower Canada, and then you have the Maritimes, which is older than all of it. You have the Calgary Edmonton corridor, and then you have southwestern British Columbia. So that's the Fraser Valley, Vancouver, and the south half of Vancouver Island. They're like 4 or 5 major. If you were king, I'd let you. I'd be, yeah. Anyway, so all these cultures grew. Yeah, and there's nothing I was going to say that would make that sound smart or funny. So, he was going to get my
Go on.
mouth and get me in so much trouble one day. So you have all these different cultures, and they're all unique and they're all independent, right? Lower Canada was predominantly francophone, French, right? Then Upper Canada, which is actually south, so British and American, right? Then the Maritimes, which is older than most of the rest of the North American continent at all. So that's all your disenfranchised, all the ones that were running away from bad religion, all the ones that were running away from taxes, all the ones they're all there. So that's the Irish, that's the French, that's the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Italians, the Scots, the Welsh, the British, etc. And they're all in those areas right there. Go over to British Columbia, and British Columbia is in some ways older than most of the rest of it because it was independently developed. Because it was so far away from Canada, they got to do things their own way. And we see that today with the problems with how they're trying to deal with the native land claims. So what would I do as King of Canada? I'd be much more inclined to say, listen, I really don't know anything about America. I do. For example, I don't know anything about Calgary and Edmonton. I don't know very much about Alberta. You guys sort your stuff out. Right? Remember that you have to have the et cetera, but sort your stuff out. And to breaking up Canada, I think, is inevitable. I am Canadian. That's my flag. And if I have a fight on my territory, that's what I'll fight for. But it is right. Canada as we knew it is not the Canada as our fathers knew it, is not the Canada as their fathers knew it, is not the Canada that my own children, even in their 30s, knew it or know it. They do not. Right. The idea of a unified nation evolves even in every generation. And a governing body needs to be aware of that and not hang on to this dinosaur of a concept, and to stand back and watch each generation, each region, because regionalism is the thing. I don't need multiculturalism because I have regionalism, right? And regionalism is not merely defined by whether there were Europeans here or whether there were Africans here or whether there were Asians here, as much as it is defined by the geology of the land, the resources that are available. Okay? So what I see sometime in the future is a Canada that is more like the United Provinces type of thing.
And that's why the
yes.
comment of
JT I agree with that too, but I also don't think the word Canada will be part of it.
Well, there was a comment about the origin of Canada, which is a native word. Huh?
Yeah,
means small community. Clown Ward, she says, but we were mostly all Europeans.
Yes,
we were.
Yes.
Or we still are. Are we still European in a way?
Well, if we still had our guns, we would be.
Yes, this is an issue that will maybe become more important in the next few months. Gary, thank you for reposting the stream. Repost the stream, share, like, and subscribe, because I have the feeling that, like GT, we will end up in jail. Don't worry, GT. I don't snore, and we can cook all together. What about when we think about the influence of the Trump administration in the process? Do you really think for Alberta it can be damageable? Because now they have a momentum, and in a few weeks or months, the pressure will start to rise. It will not go down. The pressure will be on the federal government and on the Trump administration. Do you think that they can have a duel, if I can use the expression?
BC Premier Ebby's statements of accusing Albertans, separatist sentiment Albertans, of being a traitor was in part a flag that against Albertans in the separatist movement, which is like this big nebulous thing. That's great. That'll pay my phone bill.
That's a way to derail your argument.
That there were high-level, quote-unquote, high-level discussions with high-level people in the Trump administration from Alberta, and I'm like, yeah, so what? What? I'm not allowed to talk to people now, right? So it's what's her face? Melanie Jolie getting mad about Javier. I can't pronounce his name right.
Javier Miele.
Sorry, no, the Canadian CPC member of Parliament who went down
Oh,
there.
okay. I forgot his name. No, I know who you mean.
I can't, but right. So and made noise about why did he go down? Well, he went down there because he's a freaking MP. It's still a free country. People have the ability, should be able to talk to who they want to talk to. This is ridiculous, right? Don't it reminds me of in the 90s, a letter got circulated from Charles to a woman who was a chambermaid, I believe, in one of the castles at the home, and she had applied for a position that was like a significant promotion. And he wrote her back a letter that basically said, it is a privilege that you are here at all. Do not ascribe above your station. I'm like, oh.
But at the time there was still a dialogue between,
right.
I would say, the master and the
But
servant.
there was, but what I'm getting to is he told her, stay in your lane, right? Don't ascribe above your station. So here we have Jolie telling the CPC MP, you're not the leader of the government. I'm like, sorry, Chicky Poo, but he's actually a member of parliament. That makes him government, right? So these
Yes, yes.
internal rules. Or Ebby saying, to calling out citizens in Alberta, not even his own province, calling out citizens in Alberta who you have absolutely every right. If I want to go talk to Winnie the Pooh in China, I have the right. Now, if CSIS wants to trail me, right, they have the right. They have the right too.
That's
right?
another question, but you bring the topic of freedom of speech, because with algorithm today we can be censored, but in reality, if an MP decides to go meet a governor in United States, we see it often. We see first minister or prime minister, they go south of the border, they go to Michigan, they go to Tim Houston last week. Prime Minister of Nova Scotia was in Maine signing a contract for a windmill farm, and saying that they will be not only self-sufficient in Nova Scotia, but they will be able to provide and export energy. I was like, what is he talking about? Export energy. So Tim Houston was going there, so they are free to do what they want.
Right. So it's George Carlin. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Mm-hmm.
So even within the federal government, Parliament Hill, you've got the Liberal Party telling the other parties what they can and cannot do. I'm like, that's not how this works. Shut up. That's not how this works. So the over time, our culture becomes familiar with being reprogrammed. It's not a direct reprogramming. So I had this conversation on Facebook earlier today. If I tell you don't use bad language, you're going to hell if you use bad language. Don't curse. But you're faithful and you believe in hell, and I apply this. Sooner or later, you're going to begin to self-censor. What is it, right? What is it? Because you want to be included, right? If this is the rule to be included,
are not excluded,
or right,
excommunicated.
So if this, not excommunicated. So even in our culture, so Ebby calls Albertans traitors. He's partly signaling to British Columbian separatist-minded individuals. You too, right? Traitor by right? Fly with the crows. You're going to get shot.
By association.
Guilty by association. So the government keeps wagging the finger at various groups on the fringe, so to speak, right? These smaller, outspoken groups wagging the finger. And in so doing, the quieter, more complacent middle, right? Not the far left or the far right, but the more complacent middle that just sticks their head down and just doing their job, right? Just trying to make ends meet type of thing. And truth be told, they're the more problematic ones, because by not speaking, you've spoken. But he wags his finger at them by wagging his finger at the fringes and saying, you are bad people. They're telling the middle, don't be bad people, right? This will happen to you. To me, increases the urgency, the need, and the legitimacy for separatist sentiment to trend in Canada. Because this conversation needs to be had. If it ends up with a quote-unquote sovereignty, where the individual rights are reaffirmed in Canadian Constitution and the government actually begins to represent the constituents, then good. If it results in actual process of physical separating Canada into smaller geopolitical structures, also good. But the status quo is collapsing. What it's going to become, not sure.
I pay attention more and more to the Alberta movement and the Alberta context because it's not because I have a lot of experience, it's not because, we had two referendum that we can talk about it like we are expert, but the actual Canadian context shows a very, very different scenario that what happened in 1980 and 1995, especially with the specter of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations 2030 agenda. I have a question from Clown Word, Sylvie Jazzy. She writes, why didn't PP, which is Pierre Poilievre, go to Washington instead of sending one of his minions?
Because if you fly with the crows, you're going to get shot. Elbows up. Because even the CPC is elbows up. Pierre's handlers tell him he cannot be seen making pretty with Orange Man bad. He can't be seen. So he'll send down a young fella, and if I understand this guy, he's got the stones. He doesn't care. He's got a name to make, and he'll do it. And whether I like him or not is beside the point. I think he's capable. So send him down, right? Because he can be trusted to do what he's told to do. Because he's also an upwardly mobile young man. He's in his 40s, I think. Right? So what PP doesn't have to go down because one, his handlers say you cannot be seen with the Orange Man. Which is why he's actually up here, literally taking pictures of him and Carnival across from the same table, saying, "How can we work on this together?" You fucking piece of shit. That's all I have to say about Pierre.
Okay, there's one question about the recognition of the sovereignty of a territory called name it Alberta. I can go back to history, with the Kosovo, but not only, Crimea and some territories who voted to get away from the federal government or the actual government. Considering the state of decay of the international institution now, we talk about United Nations. I will forget about WHO. The United Nations usually would say that we will recognize your referendum or your desire for independence. Think about Palestine. The government, the Carney's government did recognize the two-state solution in the Middle East, and they said we will recognize Palestine. And they say, okay, as a government, can you imagine that the actual federal government would say, but we will not recognize the independence of Alberta? What will happen internationally, in your opinion?
Nothing. Right? Because why? Because King Charles said, you are going to develop your natural resources in a new and accelerated manner for the brave new world. So Alberta, if Alberta thinks it can find a legal path to solidarity or a separate state or an independent state, the answer is no, you will not, because the system is set up against you. And all those quote unquote conspiracy theorists who talk about the BNA Act and the Statute of Westminster and the proclamation and et cetera, and show you the illusion that is Canada. If any of you are familiar with that idea, that documentary, they can say all these things too and say it's not legitimate. Anything is legitimate as long as I can stick my finger in your face and force you to do it. And CRA makes that possible in Canada. FinTrack makes that possible in Canada. I don't even have to have a legal grounds. And most of what the government's done, certainly since COVID, has no zero goose egg legal grounds because everything is by mandate. None of this is legislation. They can't pass legislation because they know it won't survive the court. So they pass mandates, and the court passes responses to the mandate and basically says, "Oh, this is moot. It's outside of our jurisdiction. We don't really have anything to say about it." And actually, the court's right because the court only speaks on legislation. So then the government's pulling dirty tricks, and the citizenry, when they go to speak up, look at the convoy, FinTrack that's used against them as a weapon. So you have people having bank accounts frozen. Several months ago, I had my bank account locked out for a separate reason. I'm just a shitty credit rating, but I had my bank locked 3 days, and when I found out about it, I'm sitting down at the bench at the bank. I actually had to sit down and absorb it, and I thought for myself, "Holy shit! I wonder if this is what it felt like for those people who just went to go get groceries and realized that every card was bouncing. Like they couldn't go to the ATM. What did this must have been like, for young people or families?" And I was like, "Holy fuck,
for days and weeks and
right,
months."
right,
Exactly.
holy crap! This is a powerful tool to use against people, right? Digital currency, digital ID, same thing. Right?
But in this matter, like I said, the pressure will rise. When we will arrive at the date of the referendum. I think it will be a nationwide event because forget about Quebec. Alberta is leading the charge.
If Alberta has a referendum, Danielle Steele will write the question, and it will be written in such a way that nobody loses. Nobody wins.
What do you mean if? They will. No?
If they say that they're running, that they're doing like polls and stuff now.
What's the deadline for the signature? I think it is March, something like that.
But who imposed the deadline?
Well,
a legal system. Just finished saying no legal system. You will not be able to.
No, but if you comply with Election Canada or Election in Alberta, it's an organization.
Again, that's but you're still trying to use legal means. You're still trying to use the system. You're still trying to use the Constitution. You're still trying to use a system that is designed to prevent you from throwing the tea into the Boston Harbor. So throw the tea into the harbor. Martin Luther King was right. As much as your conscience permits you, you need to participate.
Well, 2022, the Coots event showed that Albertans, they are courageous and they did not want to back down.
Yep.
I wish that we will not arrive to this situation in a sense that it has to be, I will not use the word democratic, but I will use the word fair. A fair process means people, I'm not even talking about negotiation. The process should be fair, but I'm worried, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about what could happen in the next 3 to 6 months.
The Alberta Prosperity Project is very, very important. It is culturally important for Alberta. It is culturally important for the West. It is culturally important for Canada. I think, regardless of how we look at Quebec and the history of Quebec's relationship with the West, it would do the Alberta leaders of these movements, the Saskatchewan leaders, the BC leaders, would do them well to study Quebec's history with Ottawa. And if you have to go back to the Plains of Abraham, then so be it, right? And to study it, I'm not saying it sets the pattern. I'm saying it that to understand the sentiment of the people and how they are moved and how they are manipulated so that they understand the machine that they are up against. What we
This
are
is this
looking,
is this is a good point, and I will talk about my personal opinion toward what is happening actually in Quebec, because I disagree with the regime. I'm not even calling them the government.
Mhm.
How they acted during the COVID mandate was extremely in an authoritarian way, and
is
they
abusive.
lost abusive. They lost a lot of people in this process, and they will never go back. They will never trust Pierre Saint-Paul Plamondon, who is the actual leader of Parti Québécois, because he's a globalist. He's aligned with the globalist agenda. So nobody will follow them. I suspect 15-20%. In Alberta and in BC, maybe we can end up on BC, the BC initiative. You were
Mhm.
saying that they have now 17,000 followers.
14. Yeah.
This movement
Yeah.
has the momentum.
Yeah.
Maybe BC will align with Alberta to fight together, to be able to put pressure on the federal government.
And yeah, and what I find interesting when I read, comments and threads that are on that particular group is while the members of the group are disproportionately more rural than they are metropolitan, but we expect that, right? That's natural. There are plenty of people down in the metropolis saying we must do something about this. This is outrageous. This is good. So I think that even though where you live will influence your leaning toward conservatism or you're leaning toward liberalism simply by access. Conservatives tend to be more resilient because they have to be, right? That type of thing. Despite these general ideas and ideologies, people from all spectrums of the Canadian politic are in this group saying something must be done. And we think that the conversation for separatism, solidarity, nationalism, whatever points to the greater issue, which is no confidence in my government. None. Right? What's the purpose of a referendum? To say the people enough of a voice to say no confidence in my government. We demand an extracurricular solution, right? An extracurricular solution. I should probably remember that's a good line. An extracurricular solution, because I don't think a legal argument can be made, but I
when
do
you when,
think
when you when you talk like this, it sounds like foreign interference.
I'm not counseling anybody. I'm not
the,
inciting. This
the,
is not incitement. It's thought thought experiment. Yeah, it's a thought experiment. See,
Sorry,
there's no
the,
conspiracy.
there are two comments that I want to bring up
Yeah.
before we end up the show. GT says the fact that they froze bank account should have told all Canadians from coast to coast that they are not worthy of holding that much power ever again. Do you think Alberta people will learn this lesson?
I think they have, because as far as I'm concerned, if you hobble a province's ability to manage its own resources, you're freezing their bank account. I mean, I'm
Another
using the
com
metaphor, right?
Yes,
I'm
yes,
using the
I
metaphor,
understand.
but
Yes, you're right. Another this is for you, Tim. Clown Wars Sylvie, she says the BC movement guy reminds me of Joe from Canada First. A lot of talk of what we already know, but not specific plan,
I
strategic plan, business plan, communication plan. What do you think, Tim?
I I
Go
am
ahead.
I have not yet had a conversation with the leaders of the BC Prosperity Project, and I would like to, for that specific reason. Do they I hear that they are organizing some type of structure. I don't know what it is. That means that they're looking at some type of hierarchical organization, and that's a good sign. Even if it's loose, that's still a good sign. So, financial responsibility, etc. That's important. Yes, the escape plan is kind of the big one, isn't it? Bring that up from unacceptable, because without an escape plan, eventually you run out of juice, because you always chasing the same thing, even if you've achieved it, because the the project or the organization takes on a life of its own, and it needs to be fed. So you're constantly, but you're like, yeah, but you achieved your goals, right? If you've achieved your goals, shut down the business and close the doors and go do something else. And the problem with some organizations is having achieved their goal, they don't know what else to do because people have become physically, financially, emotionally, religiously, spiritually, et cetera, invested into the entity that they created in order to resolve the problem. So the escape plan is having achieved right an audience with the king himself. Right, Charles came to Calgary and said, "No, I don't think so." And at least you got an audience, right? And then you sit
At
down
least
and go, okay,
at least
so
you have an
right,
you have an answer.
right, you got an answer. Now you sit down and decide, have we achieved our plan? Do we need to modify the plan? And so this organization seems to be going in this direction and properly doing this. I haven't had a conversation with them. I don't even know the names, although I would like to find out more about that.
They did
So
not. You are still a president of the Fraser Valley. Still, for the People's Party, you have a lot of experience, in structuring movement and with business plan. Are you?
no, I'm no
Do
longer.
you?
I am no longer a
Yes, but
I'm no
forget
longer
about the
with the People's
PPC.
Party of Canada.
You still you have this experience, of organizing a structure. If they would reach to you, what you would tell them?
That I want to be king of Canada.
$2,000 per hour.
Well, 250 is a good start.
Okay. There's another comment from Sylvie Tim's a Fed.
It's funny because I am. I believe it is possible to have a united Canada, but I think that it hinges entirely on permitting the provinces to manage their own shit.
Is it a pejorative phrase? Federal?
Don't call me a Fed. He's a Fed. Well, 250 is a good. Show me the money.
That's an American connotation. The Fed, like,
Right? Yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting. Anyway,
It would be it would be more like, I would be like, was it the quest for the Holy Grail, the Guardian, right? I am cold, Tim. Yeah, just for fun. I'd wear
yes,
the
yes.
horns. I'd wear the horns.
Which
Carry a
horn?
staff.
We will not talk about the Epstein file tonight. I guarantee you. We
No,
try to
it's a
avoid.
Monty Python reference.
Yes, I know, but I just wanted to make
No,
a
no,
small
no, no,
reference to what is happening.
no,
We try to
no,
avoid this
no.
topic. It is
We are definitely
everywhere.
avoiding that because I only see one solution to that, and that involves rope in public squares and crow feasts.
You forgot the soap. It's you who taught me that.
The soap.
But it's you. One day, when I remember, you said, "Okay, rope and soap." I said, "Why the soap?" And then I understood the soap. So
Right.
it slides better.
That's right. Yeah.
So Tim, your final word. You're the host tonight.
The separatist sentiment in the West is a conversation that absolutely must be had. And I think that we will come back and revisit this as we move forward, because I think we're going to have this kind of conversation around for months. For months. No, Clown World, I'm intentionally not discussing Epstein because that is horrific on a scale that I am not prepared to look at.
There's another comment from GT. The federal government is not run by Canadian. It already is international. I will just make a small correction. It's not international. It's global. Yeah. Because in Canada we have global affair.
Global affairs.
Global affairs.
Was it the Economic Forum? What's that one called? The Center for Economic Forum. It was put together in the 70s or 80s. Anyway, it's I think it's in America. You could almost take the word Canadian and international and mash it together and call it Canadian International. Canadian. Never mind. It worked. Sounded good in my head.
JT's in jail. You wrote, "Don't drop the soap."
Don't drop the soap. Yeah. Sleep on the bottom bunk.
So
separation is an important conversation.
Final word for our viewers.
Thank you for coming out.
That's it.
Oh, you want to hear more, just press replay.
Anyway, for our viewers, thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing the stream with your comments and questions. We had a lot of fun, and I hope next week we will bring back our dear friend Peyman, who is still most probably in Florida, wandering around if he will be able to finish his deck and come back in Canada. So until then, I wish you a good weekend, and
Yes.
don't try to stress too much. Canada will still be here at least until the end of the weekend.
Or the end of the world, whichever comes first.
Well, yes, that's another topic. Anyway, thanks a lot, Tim. Have a good
Have a
night.
good day. Thank you, Andre.